Hi there, friends. Thanks for tuning in to NO Harry. Get ready for an incredible journey as we present, What if Gringotts Goblins found 143 memory charms on Harry at age 4 and entire Goblin Empire invaded Hogwarts? If you find our stories entertaining, a simple like and subscribe would mean everything to us. Your support motivates us to create more. Here we go. Chapter 1, The Memory Thief. Rain hammered the London streets so hard it bounced off the pavement in silver sheets. Arabella Figg clutched the small, shivering bundle tighter to her chest and ran. "Hold on, Harry," she muttered, boots splashing through a puddle that nearly took her down. "Just a bit farther. Please, just a bit farther." The child in her arms made no answer. He hadn't spoken a single word in the 3 days she'd been watching him through her cracked curtains. Not when she'd found him locked in the cupboard under the stairs. Not when she'd coaxed him out with warm milk. Not even when he'd flinched so hard at the sound of Vernon Dursley's voice booming from the front hall that he'd bitten his own tongue bloody. Arabella had seen a lot of ugly things in her life. She'd fought in the last war, in her own small, stubborn way. She'd carried messages under the noses of Death Eaters. She'd buried friends. But nothing had made her stomach turn quite like the sight of that cupboard door with its little sliding latch on the outside. She turned a corner so fast her umbrella flew inside out and went skittering away down the gutter. She didn't stop for it. Gringotts stood at the end of the street like a knife blade driven into the earth, tall, white, and utterly indifferent to the weather. Its bronze doors gleamed even in the downpour. Goblin guards in crimson cloaks stood beneath the archway, spears upright, faces carved from stone. Arabella stumbled up the steps and nearly collapsed into one of them. "I need help," she gasped. "Please. It's Harry Potter. Something's wrong with him." The guard's eyes flicked down to the child. For the first time, something moved behind that stony expression. "Bring him inside," the goblin said. The moment they crossed the threshold, the rain's roar cut off as if someone had slammed a door. Warm air wrapped around them, thick with the smell of metal, parchment, and something older, like deep caves and cold stone. Another goblin appeared at the end of the hall, robes trimmed in iron thread. He was older, his ears notched with old scars, his eyes sharp as broken glass. "I am Ragnok, director of Gringotts," he said. His voice was low, precise, and dangerous in the way a drawn blade was dangerous. "Why have you brought the boy who lived to our doors?" Arabella swallowed. Her knees were shaking so badly she had to lock them. "Because he's not living," she said. "Not really. He's empty. Like someone scooped out his insides and left a shell." Ragnok's gaze sharpened. He stepped closer and looked down at Harry. The boy was 4 years old, small for his age, with a mop of black hair plastered to his forehead by rain. A jagged lightning bolt scar stood out livid against his pale skin. But it was his eyes that made Ragnok go still. Green. Too green. Like cursed emeralds. And utterly vacant. Harry didn't look at Ragnok. He didn't look at Arabella. He stared straight ahead at nothing, his fingers curled around a threadbare blanket so tightly his knuckles were white. Ragnok reached out slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. He touched 2 fingers to Harry's forehead. The air in the hall snapped. A sound like metal screaming under stress rang out, so high and piercing that every goblin in earshot flinched. The torches along the walls flared blue. Somewhere deep beneath the bank, something heavy and ancient woke up with a groan. Ragnok jerked his hand back as though burned. "What in the name of the deep vaults?" he breathed. Arabella's voice shook. "What is it?" Ragnok turned to the guards. "Summon the healers. Now. And seal the bank. No one enters or leaves." The guards bolted. Ragnok looked back at Harry, and for the first time in Arabella's memory, the Goblin King looked afraid. "This child," he said quietly, "has been violated." The healing caves beneath Gringotts were nothing like the sterile white rooms Arabella had imagined. They were vast, cathedral-like chambers carved from living rock, lit by veins of phosphorescent crystal that pulsed softly like sleeping hearts. The air smelled of herbs, smoke, and cold water. Harry lay on a stone slab in the center of the largest cave. Tiny silver chains had been laid around him in a circle, each link etched with runes so old they seemed to writhe when Arabella looked at them too long. A dozen goblin healers moved around the slab in silence, their hands gloved in black leather. One of them, a female goblin with hair braided tight to her skull and eyes like chips of flint, held a thin silver wand that hummed with power. Ragnok stood at Harry's head. Arabella hovered near the edge of the circle, twisting her wet gloves in her hands until the leather squeaked. "Begin," Ragnok said. The lead healer, Griselda, Arabella would later learn, pressed the tip of her silver wand to Harry's scar. The crystals in the walls flared blinding white. Harry's small body arched off the slab like he'd been struck by lightning. A sound tore from his throat, not a scream, not a cry, but something raw and broken, as if his very soul was being pulled apart. Arabella lunged forward. "Stop! You're hurting him." Two guards caught her arms. Ragnok didn't look away from Harry. "If we stop now, the damage becomes permanent." Griselda's voice was tight. "First charm located. Layered deep. Woven into the hippocampus. This is old magic. Wizard magic." Another healer leaned in, chanting in a harsh, clicking language that made Arabella's teeth ache. The silver chains around the slab began to glow. Griselda twisted her wand. Harry convulsed again. The blue-white light above him shuddered, and suddenly, like smoke being sucked into a vent, a thin, shimmering veil peeled away from his forehead. It hovered in the air, writhing, translucent and foul. Griselda caught it in a crystal vial and slammed the stopper down. "One," she said grimly. Arabella's stomach dropped. "One what?" Ragnok's jaw tightened. "One memory charm." They worked for hours. Charm after charm after charm. Each time, Harry's body fought. Each time, the cave filled with that terrible, high metallic scream. Each time, Griselda pulled another shimmering veil from his mind and sealed it away. By midnight, the crystal vials lined the stone table like rows of captured ghosts. Arabella had stopped counting at 50. By dawn, she'd stopped breathing every time Harry screamed. By noon, the lead healer's hands were shaking. Ragnok hadn't moved from his place at Harry's head. His knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the slab. When Griselda finally lowered her wand and staggered back, the silence that fell was deafening. No one spoke. Arabella looked at the table. 143 crystal vials sat in neat rows, each containing a swirling, malevolent mist. Griselda's voice was hoarse. 143 memory charms. All placed before the age of 4. Some are layered on top of each other. Reapplied. Reinforced. This wasn't carelessness. Ragnok's eyes burned like banked coals. This was deliberate. Arabella felt sick. Who would do that to a child? Griselda's lips thinned. Whoever did this didn't just want to hide memories. They wanted to rewrite him. As if in response, Harry made a tiny sound. Everyone froze. It was the first noise he'd made that wasn't pain. A soft, confused whimper. Like a baby waking from a nightmare. His eyelids fluttered. Arabella took an involuntary step forward. Harry. Harry's eyes opened. For the first time since she'd found him, they weren't empty. They were terrified. He looked around the cave wildly, taking in the goblins, the crystals, the silver chains. His small chest heaved. Then he saw Arabella. "Bella," he whispered, voice cracked and tiny. Arabella burst into tears so hard she had to clap a hand over her mouth. Harry's face crumpled. "Hurts," he said, voice wobbling. "My head hurts." Griselda was at his side in an instant, pressing a cup of bitter-smelling potion to his lips. "Drink, little one. It will help." Harry drank obediently, then immediately burst into sobs. Big, hiccuping, child sobs that shook his whole body. Ragnok crouched beside the slab, bringing himself down to Harry's level. His voice, when he spoke, was gentler than Arabella would have thought possible. "Harry Potter," he said. "Do you know where you are?" Harry shook his head violently, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Bad house. Cupboard." Aunt Petunia yelled. "Uncle Vernon," he broke off, trembling. "He said I'm a freak." Arabella made a choked sound. Ragnok's expression went utterly still. When he spoke again, each word was like iron striking an anvil. "No," he said. "You are not a freak. You are a child. And you have been grievously wronged." Harry stared at him through wet lashes. "You're not yelling." "No," Ragnok said. "Goblins do not yell at children." Harry hiccuped. "Are you gonna lock me in a cupboard?" Ragnok's eyes flashed with such fury that the nearest crystal vein dimmed. "No," he said, voice like thunder now. "No one will ever lock you in a cupboard again. On my honor as king of the Goblin Nation, I swear it." Harry's lip wobbled. He looked at Arabella. "Bella, am I bad?" Arabella dropped to her knees beside the slab, heedless of the guards. She took Harry's small, clammy hand in both of hers. "Oh, Harry," she whispered. "No. You're not bad. You're the bravest little boy I've ever met." Harry squeezed her fingers so hard it hurt. Ragnok straightened and turned to Griselda. "How many of these charms can we safely remove?" Griselda's face was grim. "All of them. But it must be done slowly. 1 per week, at minimum. Any faster and we risk shattering his mind entirely." 1 per week, Ragnok repeated. 143 weeks. Arabella did the math quickly. "Nearly 3 years. "Yes," Griselda said. "And during that time, his memories will return in fragments. Some may be traumatic." Ragnok looked down at Harry, who had curled into Arabella's side like he was trying to disappear into her coat. "Then we will be here," Ragnok said. "Every step of the way." That evening, long after Harry had been given a sleeping draught and tucked into a small bed carved into the rock of the Healing Caves, Ragnok stood in the deepest chamber of Gringotts, the chamber of ancient treaties. Torches burned with green fire. Shelves carved into the walls held scrolls so old the parchment had turned black. In the center of the room stood a stone pedestal, and upon it rested a single iron-bound book. The Treaty of Stone and Blood. Ragnok placed his hand on the cover. The metal was cold enough to burn. Behind him, Griselda and 3 senior goblin lords entered silently. The charms were placed by wizards, Griselda said without preamble. "Multiple signatures. I recognize the magical fingerprints of at least 3 different casters. One of them," she hesitated. "One of them matches the magical signature on file for Albus Dumbledore." A dangerous murmur ran through the lords. Ragnok's fingers tightened on the book. "Dumbledore." "The others," Griselda continued, "belong to officials in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. And one," her voice went flat. "One is a Death Eater's mark. Corrupted. Twisted." Silence fell. One of the lords, a scarred veteran named Cragnash, stepped forward. "This is an act of war." "It is worse than war," Ragnok said. "It is sacrilege. Memory is sacred to our people. To steal a child's memories is to steal his soul." He opened the Treaty of Stone and Blood. The pages were written in a language older than Hogwarts, older than the Ministry, older than Britain itself. Ragnok read aloud, his voice rolling through the chamber like distant thunder. "When a child of any magical blood is harmed by those sworn to protect, the Goblin Nation shall have the right to claim guardianship, to exact justice, and to invoke the old laws of retribution. Griselda's eyes gleamed. Harry Potter is an orphan. Placed with Muggles who abused him. And violated by wizard magic. The treaty applies. Ragnok closed the book with a snap. Then it is decided, he said. Harry Potter is under the protection of Gringotts. He will be raised among us until he comes of age. And when the time comes to uncover every last person responsible for what was done to him, he looked at each of the goblin lords in turn. We will not ask permission. Far above, in a small carved bedroom deep beneath the bank, Harry Potter slept for the first time without whimpering. Outside his door, a young goblin warrior with bright black eyes and a wicked grin sat cross-legged on the stone floor, polishing a curved silver blade. His name was Griphook. And he'd taken one look at the tiny, broken boy in the healing caves and made a silent vow of his own. Nobody was ever going to hurt Harry Potter again. Not wizards. Not Muggles. Not anyone. Griphook tested the edge of his blade with his thumb. A thin line of red appeared. He smiled. Chapter 2, Fragments of Truth. The first winter Harry spent beneath Gringotts, he woke every night screaming. Not the loud, attention-seeking kind of screaming. The quiet, desperate kind, like he was trying not to be heard. He'd bolt upright in his carved stone bed, blankets tangled around his legs, eyes wide and shining in the dim crystal light, gasping like he'd been underwater. Griphook was always there. The young goblin warrior had taken the job nobody officially gave him. He slept on a pallet outside Harry's door, sword within arm's reach, one ear always cocked toward the room. The first time it happened, he'd burst in with the blade half drawn, heart hammering, only to find Harry sitting in the middle of the bed, shaking so hard the mattress stones rattled. Hey, Griphook had said, lowering the sword fast. Hey, it's all right. You're safe. Harry's eyes found him in the dark. For a second he looked right through him, like he was seeing something else. Then he whispered, the cupboard door. It locked. It locked from the outside. Griphook's grip tightened on the sword hilt until his knuckles ached. No cupboard here, he said. Look around. Stone walls. No doors with latches. No locks you can't open from the inside. Harry's breathing hitched. He looked around slowly, like he didn't quite believe it. The carved bedposts. The little shelf of smooth river stones he liked to line up by color. The silver cup of water that never went cold, no matter how long it sat. His shoulders sagged. I thought, he started, then stopped. His voice was so small it barely existed. I thought maybe I dreamed the goblins. Griphook snorted. If you dreamed us, we'd be a lot prettier. That got a tiny, watery laugh out of Harry. It wasn't much, but it was the first real laugh Griphook had ever heard from him. From then on, Griphook started keeping a tin of honey cakes under his pallet. Every time Harry had a nightmare, he'd bring one in, still warm from the bank's underground ovens. Eat, he'd say. Honey makes bad dreams slippery. They slide right out of your head. Harry would nibble at the cake with careful, suspicious little bites, like he expected someone to snatch it away. Griphook hated that more than the nightmares. By the time Harry turned 5, he'd stopped flinching every time a goblin raised a hand. He'd started following Griphook around the lower tunnels like a shadow, bare feet silent on the stone. He learned the bank's rhythms the way other kids learned nursery rhymes. At dawn, the great bronze doors boomed shut, and the echoes rolled through the tunnels for a full minute. At midday, the forges beneath Gringotts roared to life, filling the air with heat and the smell of molten metal. At night, the crystal veins in the walls pulsed slower, like they were sleeping. And every Thursday, like clockwork, Harry went to the healing caves. The first few sessions were awful. Griselda would sit him on the stone slab, which he hated because it reminded him of the bad house, and press the tip of her silver wand to his scar. The moment the magic touched him, Harry would seize up, eyes rolling back, fingers clawing at the stone. Sometimes he screamed. Sometimes he just went rigid and silent, tears leaking out the corners of his eyes. Griphook always stood at the foot of the slab, one hand on his sword, the other clenched into a fist so tight his nails drew blood. Ragnok always stood at Harry's head, speaking in a low, steady voice the whole time. "Breathe, Harry. In through your nose. Out through your mouth. That's it. You're not alone. I'm here. Griphook's here. Griselda's here. We've got you." Afterward, Harry would be sick. Then he'd sleep for 12 hours straight. And when he woke up, he'd be different. Not broken. Just changed, like a room you've rearranged the furniture in. One Thursday, when Harry was 6, he woke up from a healing session and looked at Griphook with wide, startled eyes. "I had a cousin," he said suddenly. Griphook blinked. "A cousin?" Harry nodded slowly, like he was pulling the memory up from deep water. "Dudley. He's big. He laughs loud. He pushed me down the stairs once." Griphook's stomach went cold. "Did he now?" Harry's lower lip trembled. "Aunt Petunia gave him ice cream after." Griphook didn't trust himself to speak for a second. When he finally did, his voice came out rough. "Listen to me, Harry. What they did to you wasn't your fault. And it wasn't normal. Not even a little bit." Harry looked down at his hands. "But I'm weird." Griphook crouched in front of him so their eyes were level. "You're not weird. You're magic. There's a difference." Harry frowned. "What's the difference?" Griphook grinned, sharp and fierce. "Weird is when old man Cragnash puts salt in his tea instead of sugar. Magic is when you can make a whole room shake just because you're scared." Harry's eyes went wide. "I did that?" "You did," Griphook said proudly. "Scared the piss out of 3 guards and made Griselda drop her wand down a drain." Harry giggled, then clapped both hands over his mouth like he'd done something wrong. Griphook ruffled his hair. "Laugh when you want to laugh, Harry. Nobody here's gonna punish you for it." That became the rule Harry lived by, slowly, stubbornly, like learning to walk again. By the time he was 7, he could speak gobbledygook, harsh, clicking, beautiful in its precision. He could name every vein of crystal in the lower tunnels and tell you which ones hummed when a storm was coming. He could stand at the edge of the great underground river that ran beneath Gringotts and skip flat stones across the black water so well the goblin children started challenging him to contests. He even started calling Ragnok grandfather, once, by accident. They'd been in Ragnok's private study, going over Harry's lessons in goblin history. Harry had been fidgeting, bored out of his mind, poking at a map of the old goblin kingdoms with one finger. "This is stupid," he'd muttered. "Why do I have to learn all this old stuff?" Ragnok had looked up from his ledgers, eyes narrowing. "Because history is a weapon, Harry. Those who forget it get cut by it." Harry had scowled. "You sound like Griselda." "I'll take that as a compliment," Ragnok said dryly. Harry had huffed, then said, without thinking, "Fine. But you're not the boss of me, grandfather." The room went dead silent. Harry's eyes went wide. He clapped both hands over his mouth. I didn't mean," Ragnok set down his quill very carefully. For a long moment, he just stared at Harry. Something complicated moved behind his eyes, surprise, and something softer, something he clearly didn't know what to do with. Then, very quietly, he said, "You may call me that, if you wish." Harry peeked at him through his fingers. "Really?" "Yes," Ragnok said. His voice was rougher than usual. "But only in private." Harry's face broke into a grin so bright it could have lit the whole study. "Okay. Grandfather." Ragnok cleared his throat and went back to his ledgers with great determination, but Harry saw the corner of his mouth twitch. That night, Griphook found Ragnok standing alone in the Chamber of Ancient Treaties, staring at the iron-bound book. "You're getting attached," Griphook said bluntly. Ragnok didn't turn around. "Is that a problem?" Griphook leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Depends. Goblin kings aren't supposed to get attached to wizard children." Ragnok's jaw tightened. "He is not just a wizard child." "No," Griphook said. "He's Harry." Ragnok finally looked at him. In the green torchlight, he looked older than Griphook had ever seen him. "Every week, we pull another piece of him back from the people who tried to erase him. And every week, I want to burn their world down a little more." Griphook's grin was sharp. "Good. Because I've been practicing." Ragnok's eyes flashed. "Not yet. We wait. We gather proof. We make sure when we strike, we cannot be denied justice." Griphook pushed off the doorway. "And when the time comes?" Ragnok's voice was like iron. "When the time comes, the wizarding world will learn what it means to steal from goblins." The memories kept coming. At 8, Harry remembered his parents' voices for the first time. He'd been sitting by the underground river with Griphook, skipping stones, when suddenly he went rigid and dropped the rock in his hand. It plunked into the black water and vanished. Griphook caught him by the shoulders. "Harry? What is it?" Harry's eyes were glassy. "A woman," he whispered. "She was singing. She had red hair. And a man," he laughed. He said, "You're going to be trouble, James Jr." Griphook's breath caught. "James Jr.?" Harry's face crumpled. "They're dead, aren't they?" Griphook didn't lie to him. "Not ever." "Yes," he said softly. "They died to protect you." Harry started crying then, great heaving sobs that echoed off the cave walls. Griphook pulled him into a rough hug and let him soak the front of his leather armor. "I didn't even remember them," Harry choked out. "How could I forget my own mum and dad?" Griphook's voice was fierce. "Because evil people took them from you twice. First when they killed them. Then when they stole your memories." Harry clung to him tighter. "I hate them." Griphook's arms tightened around him. "Good. Hate can be useful. Just don't let it eat you alive." At 9, Harry remembered the night his parents died. It came in pieces, jagged and bloody. A flash of green light. A high, cold laugh. A woman screaming, "Not Harry. Please, not Harry." The sound of wood splintering. A baby crying. And then, darkness. Harry woke from that healing session screaming so hard he tore his throat raw. He thrashed on the slab, fighting Griselda's hands, fighting Ragnok's grip, fighting ghosts only he could see. "No," he shrieked. "Mom! Dad! Come back! Come back!" Griphook had to be physically dragged out of the cave by 2 guards because he kept trying to get to Harry, kept shouting, "Let me through, damn you, let me through." When it was over, Harry lay limp and shaking, staring at the ceiling with empty eyes. Ragnok crouched beside him, voice like broken stone. "Harry! Look at me." Harry's gaze drifted slowly to him. "Do you know who did it?" Ragnok asked, very carefully. Harry's lips moved. For a second no sound came out. Then, in a whisper so thin it could have been mistaken for the wind, "Voldemort." The name hit the cave like a curse. Griselda flinched. One of the healers dropped a vial. Even Ragnok went pale under his iron-gray skin. Griphook, who'd finally fought his way back in, froze in the doorway. "He said what?" Harry's eyes filled with tears. "He killed them. He tried to kill me. And his voice broke. I lived. Why did I live?" Ragnok took Harry's face between his hands, gentle but firm. "Because your mother loved you enough to stop him. Because love is older and stronger than any dark magic. And because you, Harry Potter, are not done fighting yet. Harry sobbed into Ragnok's hands. Outside the healing caves, word spread like wildfire through the goblin tunnels. The Dark Lord had returned. He had murdered the Potters. And he had tried to destroy their son. The Goblin Nation's hatred of Voldemort, already deep, turned into something volcanic. By the time Harry turned 10, he was fluent in 3 magical languages, could read ancient runes as easily as other kids read storybooks, and had a scar that sometimes burned when he was angry. He also had a best friend. Griphook had started teaching him sword work in secret, down by the underground river where the echoes wouldn't carry. At first Harry was terrible at it, too small, too clumsy, too used to being punished for making mistakes. But Griphook was patient in a way nobody had ever been with him before. Again, he'd say, when Harry dropped the practice blade for the 10th time. And again. And again. Until your hands remember. Harry would grit his teeth, pick up the sword, and try once more. And slowly, painfully, he got better. One afternoon, when Harry was 11 and the river was running high and black, he disarmed Griphook for the first time. The practice blade went clattering across the stone. Griphook stared at his empty hand, then at Harry. Harry's eyes went wide. I didn't mean to. Griphook let out a bark of laughter so loud it echoed off the cavern ceiling. Didn't mean to. Harry, you beat me. Harry's face flushed with pride so fierce it almost hurt. Really? Really, Griphook said, clapping him on the shoulder hard enough to make him stagger. You've got goblin steel in you, kid. Harry beamed. That was the moment Ragnok chose to appear at the edge of the riverbank, silent as a shadow. Harry spun around, startled. Grandfather. I didn't know you were. Ragnok held up a hand. His eyes were fixed on the practice sword in Harry's grip. How long has this been going on? Griphook opened his mouth, probably to lie. Harry beat him to it. A year, he said, chin up. Griphook's been teaching me. And I'm good at it. Ragnok's gaze shifted to Griphook. For a second, Griphook looked like he was bracing for a blow. Then Ragnok did something unexpected. He smiled. A small smile, sharp as a blade's edge, but real. Good, Ragnok said. A Potter who can't defend himself is a tragedy waiting to happen. Harry's chest swelled. Does that mean I can keep training? It means, Ragnok said, stepping closer, that from now on, you'll train with the Royal Guard. Griphook let out a low whistle. The Royal Guard? Ragnok, I know what it is, Ragnok said. He looked down at Harry, and for a moment the kingly mask slipped. What showed underneath was something fierce and protective and almost tender. Harry Potter is under my protection. If the wizarding world comes for him, they will find he is no longer defenseless. Harry swallowed. Are they going to come for me? Ragnok's eyes darkened. Some of them already have. The next Thursday, the healing caves felt different. The air was colder. The crystals pulsed faster, like they were nervous. Griselda's hands were steadier than usual, but her face was grim. Harry lay on the slab, 11 years old now, too tall for it, his feet hanging off the end. He looked at Ragnok, at Griphook, at Griselda. I'm scared, he admitted. Griphook squeezed his hand. That's all right. Being scared just means you're not stupid. Griselda pressed her wand to his scar. This is the 143rd charm, Harry. The last one. Harry's breath hitched. The last one. The last one, Ragnok confirmed. Whatever they hid from you, after this, there will be no more lies in your head. Harry nodded, jaw tight. Okay. Do it. The magic hit him like a tidal wave. Harry arched off the slab with a scream that didn't sound human. The crystals in the walls blazed so bright the whole cave turned white. The silver chains around the slab glowed red-hot. Wind whipped through the chamber, though there were no doors open. Griphook held on to Harry's hand so hard it hurt, shouting his name over and over. Ragnok stood like a statue, but his eyes were blazing. Griselda chanted in the old goblin tongue, voice rising, and then, with a sound like shattering glass, the final memory charm tore free. It didn't drift gently into a vial. It exploded. A shockwave blasted through the healing caves, knocking healers off their feet, sending crystal shards raining from the ceiling. Griphook was thrown backward into the wall. Ragnok staggered but stayed upright, shielding Harry with his own body. When the light faded, Harry lay motionless on the slab, chest heaving. For one terrible second, nobody moved. Then Harry's eyes flew open. But they weren't green anymore. They were blazing, emerald fire shot through with something else, something ancient and furious. He sat up so fast Griselda stumbled back. "Harry?" Griphook croaked, scrambling to his feet. Harry looked at him, but it was like he was seeing him from very far away. His voice, when it came, was hoarse and shaking with rage. "I remember," he said. Ragnok stepped closer, carefully. "What do you remember?" Harry's hands curled into fists so tight his nails drew blood. "I remember who put the charms on me," he said, each word dripping with venom. "I remember why. And I remember what they did to my parents." The cave went dead silent. Harry looked up at Ragnok, and in his burning eyes was a promise of violence. "It wasn't just Voldemort," he said. "Dumbledore knew. The Ministry knew. They all knew. They left me there. They wanted me weak. They wanted me manipulable. They were going to use me like a weapon." Ragnok's face went utterly still. Griphook's hand went to his sword hilt. Griselda's lips parted in horror. Harry's voice rose, shaking the crystals in the walls. "And Dumbledore," he spat, "he's the one who placed the first charm. When I was a baby. He looked at me in my crib and decided my mind wasn't mine to keep." Ragnok stared at him for a long, terrible moment. Then he turned to Griselda. "Send word to every goblin clan," he said, voice like thunder rolling through a mountain. "Summon the army. Summon the warforges. Summon the old banners." Griselda's eyes widened. Ragnok's gaze snapped back to Harry, then to the iron-bound treaty of stone and blood in the corner of the cave. "We are going to Hogwarts," he said. Griphook's grin was savage. "About bloody time." Harry slid off the slab, legs shaky but determined. He looked up at Ragnok, at Griphook, at the gathered healers and guards. "Will you help me?" he asked, voice small but fierce. Ragnok placed a heavy hand on Harry's shoulder. "We will not help you," he said. "We will stand with you." Above them, deep in the heart of Gringotts, the great war drums began to beat. Boom. 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 The sound rolled through the tunnels, through the streets of Diagon Alley, through the bones of the earth itself. And far away, in the high towers of Hogwarts Castle, the windows rattled. Chapter 3, The Reckoning. The Goblin army moved through Scotland like a shadow passing over the land, silent, inevitable, and cold with purpose. 5,000 warriors in gleaming armor forged from metals that had no names in human languages. Banners of midnight blue and crimson that snapped in the wind, emblazoned with runes so ancient they burned the eye to look upon them. War drums that beat with the rhythm of a vengeful heart. And at the center of it all, Harry Potter rode beside Ragnok. They'd given him armor too, not the bulky plate that wizards imagined when they thought of goblin warriors, but something lighter, closer to the skin, etched with protection runes and woven with spells that bent light around the edges. It fit him perfectly, unlike anything he'd ever worn at the Dursleys. Beside him, Griphook rode a stocky mountain pony, his sword gleaming at his hip. He kept glancing at Harry, his face caught between worry and fierce pride. "All right," he asked as they crested a hill that gave them their first distant glimpse of Hogwarts Castle, a dark silhouette against the twilight sky, towers stabbing up like accusing fingers. Harry swallowed hard. His scar had been burning steadily since they'd left Gringotts, a dull throb that matched the rhythm of the war drums. I think so. Griphook snorted. Liar. Harry's mouth quirked. Fine. I'm terrified. That's more like it, Griphook said, nodding approvingly. Only idiots aren't afraid before battle. Harry looked at the castle in the distance, at the place that should have been his first real home, before they'd stolen his memories and left him with people who hated him. What if they don't listen? What if they just see a goblin army and start fighting? Ragnok's voice came from his other side, low and sure. That's why you're with us, Harry. You are the living proof of their crimes. You are the reason they cannot dismiss us. Harry's hands tightened on his reins. And if they still try? Ragnok's eyes glittered in the fading light. Then they will learn why goblins are feared. They made camp at the edge of the Forbidden Forest, just beyond the boundaries of Hogwarts grounds. The forest itself seemed to draw back from them, trees creaking uneasily in the windless evening. From their position, they could see the lights of the castle blazing against the darkening sky. Occasionally, a figure would appear at one of the higher windows, staring out at the goblin encampment. News traveled fast in the wizarding world. By now, Dumbledore would know they were coming. Harry sat by the central fire, a bowl of untouched stew cooling in his hands. His stomach was too knotted to eat. He kept seeing fragments of memories, clearer now that all the charms had been removed, but still broken, still jagged. His father, face tight with fear, shouting, "Lily, take Harry and go. It's him. Go. Run." Dumbledore, bearded face solemn in candlelight, waving his wand over a baby's crib. "It's for the greater good, Minerva." The boy cannot remember. A ministry official with a monocle, sneering. Obliviate him again. He's starting to ask questions. The Dursley's kitchen. A small Harry, maybe 3 years old, floating a cookie toward himself. Petunia screaming. Vernon's face purple with rage. And then, appearing out of nowhere, a tall figure in ministry robes, wand already raised. Harry shuddered. A heavy hand landed on his shoulder. He looked up to see Ragnok standing over him, face grave in the firelight. "Come," the Goblin King said. "There are things you should know before tomorrow." Harry followed him to the command tent at the center of the camp. Inside, maps of Hogwarts were spread across a large stone table, detailed ones, showing not just the castle layout but the hidden passages, the chamber beneath the dungeons, the room on the 7th floor that appeared only when needed. Harry stared. "How do you have these?" "Goblins built Hogwarts," Ragnok said simply. "Just as we built Gringotts. We never forget what our hands have made." Harry touched one of the maps with a fingertip. "They never told me that. In any of the history books." "No," Ragnok agreed. "They wouldn't." Harry looked up at him. "Why are you showing me this now?" Ragnok's expression was grave. "Because tomorrow, when we enter that castle, you will face choices. Hard choices. I want you to make them with clear eyes." "What choices?" Ragnok studied him for a long moment. "Harry Potter. Child of 2 worlds. Born to wizards, raised by goblins." He gestured to the maps. "Tomorrow, you walk into the heart of wizarding power. The place your parents learned magic. The place Albus Dumbledore has ruled for 50 years. And you must decide where you belong." Harry's throat went tight. "I belong with you. With the goblins." Ragnok shook his head slowly. "Perhaps. But perhaps not. You are different now. Neither fully wizard, nor fully goblin. A bridge between worlds. That is a rare and dangerous thing to be." "I don't understand." Ragnok's voice softened, just slightly. When we confront Dumbledore. When you face the wizards who tried to control you. There will be anger. There will be violence. But there must also be wisdom. He met Harry's eyes steadily. The path of vengeance is easy to walk, but hard to return from. Harry's scar throbbed. They don't deserve mercy. No, Ragnok agreed. They don't. But you, Harry Potter, deserve more than a life consumed by hatred. Harry looked down at his hands, calloused from sword training, nails ragged from nervously picking at them, fingers that sometimes still trembled when he woke from nightmares. What if I can't forgive them? Forgiveness is not required, Ragnok said. Justice is. Remember the difference. Harry nodded slowly. Then, voice small but determined, what's the plan? Ragnok's smile was sharp. We walk in through the front door. Dawn broke over Hogwarts like a fever, hot, red, and uneasy. The goblin army had formed ranks at the edge of the forest, 5,000 strong, armored and silent. Their banners hung limp in the still morning air. The war drums had ceased. Now there was only waiting. At the front of the formation stood Harry, flanked by Ragnok and Griphook. Behind them, goblin warriors 3 deep, then the clan elders, then the healers led by Griselda. And floating above them all, suspended in a net of silver magic that hummed with power, 143 crystal vials, each containing a shimmering memory charm extracted from Harry's mind. The evidence. The crime. The reason. As the sun cleared the horizon, the great oak doors of Hogwarts swung open. A tall figure in midnight blue robes emerged, Albus Dumbledore, his long white beard gleaming in the morning light, his face grave behind half-moon spectacles. Behind him came a procession of teachers and ministry officials, their expressions ranging from wary to hostile. Harry's scar blazed with sudden, violent pain. He swayed on his feet. Griphook grabbed his arm. Harry. Harry shook his head, teeth gritted. I'm fine. He's here. Dumbledore. I can feel it. The magic that was in my head for so long, it recognizes him. Griphook's face darkened. Bastard. Steady, Ragnok murmured. Remember who you are. Harry straightened. He drew in a deep breath, let it out slowly. I remember. Dumbledore and his entourage halted at the edge of the castle grounds, just before the place where the protective wards began. Even from a distance, Harry could see the old wizard's eyes fix on him with recognition and something that might have been relief. Or guilt. That's far enough, Albus Dumbledore, Ragnok called, his voice carrying across the open ground like thunder. We come under the ancient treaty of stone and blood to demand justice for crimes against a child under our protection. Dumbledore's voice, when he replied, was calm and measured. King Ragnok. It has been many years since a goblin army stood at the gates of Hogwarts. I would know why you have brought one now. Don't play ignorant, wizard, Ragnok said coldly. You know exactly why we are here. Dumbledore's gaze shifted to Harry. Harry, he said softly. My boy. We've been searching for you for 7 years. Something hot and ugly twisted in Harry's chest. I'm not your boy. The words came out harsher than he'd meant, echoing across the grounds. Several of the teachers behind Dumbledore shifted uneasily. Dumbledore's face creased with what looked like genuine sorrow. I see. Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside. The morning grows cold. Ragnok's laugh was a sharp bark. Do you think us fools, Dumbledore? We will meet on neutral ground, or not at all. A tall, severe-looking witch in emerald green robes stepped forward, her Scottish accent crisp. There is a pavilion prepared by the lake. Neutral territory, beyond the castle wards. Harry recognized her from a memory fragment, Minerva McGonagall, standing in the background the night Dumbledore had placed the first memory charm on him, her face pinched with disapproval. Ragnok considered for a moment, then inclined his head. Acceptable. But we come armed, and Harry remains with us. Dumbledore's eyes flickered with something, disappointment. Calculation. Then he nodded. Of course. Follow me, please. The pavilion was white marble and silver, gleaming in the morning light. It stood at the edge of the black lake, open to the air on all sides, supported by 12 slender columns. Within it, a large round table of polished stone waited, with chairs arranged around it. Harry walked between Ragnok and Griphook, acutely aware of every eye on him. The teachers whispered among themselves. The ministry officials stared openly, some with undisguised hostility. Students peered from the castle windows, their faces pale blurs in the distance. As they approached the pavilion, Harry finally got a clear look at the wizards who had come to meet them. Dumbledore, of course, his blue eyes somber behind his spectacles. McGonagall, tight-lipped and watchful. A hook-nosed man with greasy black hair, whose gaze locked onto Harry with an intensity that made his skin crawl. A tiny, ancient wizard who barely came up to Harry's elbow. And at the back, a cluster of official-looking men and women in ministry robes, their faces carefully blank. Harry's steps faltered. From the fragments of memory he'd recovered, he recognized at least 2 of the ministry officials, both had been among those who'd placed memory charms on him. Griphook noticed his hesitation. What is it? Harry nodded slightly toward the officials. 2 of them. The tall man with the silver beard, and the woman with the monocle. They were there. When I was little. They used their wands on me. Griphook's hand went to his sword hilt, knuckles white. Peace, Ragnok murmured. We do this properly. For all to witness. They entered the pavilion. No one sat. The 2 groups faced each other across the round table, goblin and wizard, ancient enemies brought together by the boy who stood between them. Dumbledore broke the silence. Perhaps introductions are in order. Ragnok's smile was razor-thin. By all means. I am Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts. With me are Professor Minerva McGonagall, deputy headmistress, Professor Severus Snape, potions master, Professor Filius Flitwick, charms master. He gestured to the ministry officials. And representatives from the Ministry of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, Minister, Bartemius Crouch, Head of International Magical Cooperation, Amelia Bones, Head of Magical Law Enforcement, and Dolores Umbridge, Senior Undersecretary. Ragnok inclined his head. I am Ragnok, King of the Goblin Nation. With me are Griphook, warrior of the Iron Claw clan and sworn brother to Harry Potter, Griselda, chief healer of Gringotts, and the clan elders of the 7 families. Dumbledore's gaze settled on Harry. And Harry Potter. The boy who lived. Missing for 7 years. Harry lifted his chin. Not missing. Safe. Dumbledore's expression grew grave. Harry, there are things you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Harry cut him off, voice steady despite the hammer of his heart. I understand that you placed memory charms on me when I was a baby. I understand that you left me with people who locked me in a cupboard and called me a freak. I understand that when I showed signs of accidental magic, you sent ministry officials to obliviate me again and again. The pavilion went deathly silent. Dumbledore's face had gone very still. These are serious accusations. Harry's laugh was bitter. They're not accusations. They're memories. My memories. The ones you tried to steal. Ragnok raised a hand. At his signal, the crystal vials floating above the goblin army began to descend, drifting through the air like fireflies until they hovered above the round table. 143 crystal vials, each glowing with a sickly silver light. 143 memory charms, Ragnok said, voice like grinding stone. Placed on a child before his 4th birthday. The magical signatures on these charms belong to people in this pavilion. His eyes burned as he looked at each wizard in turn. This is a violation of the most ancient laws of magic. It is an abomination. And it is punishable by death under Goblin law. The Minister of Magic, a portly man with a green bowler hat, spluttered. Now see here. You can't just march an army into Britain and start making threats. They're not threats, Harry said quietly. They're facts. McGonagall had gone very pale. 143, she whispered. Albus, what have you done? Dumbledore didn't answer her. His eyes remained fixed on Harry, ancient and sad. I never intended for you to be harmed, Harry. Everything I did was to protect you. Protect me? Harry's voice rose despite himself. From what? From knowing my parents loved me? From knowing magic was real? From having any power or choice in my own life? Dumbledore closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were no longer twinkling. They were the eyes of a very old man carrying a very heavy burden. From Voldemort, he said simply. A shiver ran through the pavilion at the name. Several of the ministry officials flinched visibly. He's gone, the minister said sharply. Dead and gone. And I will not have that name spoken. He is not gone, Dumbledore said, cutting him off with a glance. He is weakened, formless perhaps, but not destroyed. And Harry. Harry is connected to him in ways even I do not fully understand. Harry's scar throbbed in response, as if acknowledging the truth of Dumbledore's words. Ragnok's eyes narrowed. Explain. Dumbledore sighed heavily. When Voldemort tried to kill Harry that night, something extraordinary happened. The killing curse rebounded. But in that moment, a piece of Voldemort's power, his essence perhaps, attached itself to Harry. His scar, Griphook said suddenly. Dumbledore looked at him in surprise. Yes. The scar is where the connection lies. Harry's hand went to his forehead involuntarily. What are you saying? That I have, a piece of Voldemort in me? Not exactly, Dumbledore said carefully. But a connection, yes. One that I feared would allow him access to your mind, your memories. One that might cause you pain, or worse, influence your development. Griselda stepped forward, her healer's eyes sharp. So you placed memory charms on an infant? To block this connection? The first one, yes, Dumbledore admitted. A protective enchantment, designed to shield Harry's young mind from external influence. But the others? He glanced at the ministry officials, his expression hardening slightly. The others were not my doing. The woman with the monocle, Amelia Bones, spoke up, her voice crisp. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement was tasked with ensuring the boy who lived remained safe and undetected. When reports of accidental magic began coming from Little Whinging, standard containment protocols were enacted. Containment protocols, Harry repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Is that what you call it when you point a wand at a 3-year-old's head and make him forget he has magic? Amelia Bones at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. It was deemed necessary for the statute of secrecy. It was convenient, Ragnok corrected coldly. A weapon being forged in isolation. Kept weak and ignorant until you needed him. Dumbledore shook his head. No, not a weapon. A child who needed protection, a child who needed his memories. Harry shouted, slamming his hands down on the table. The crystal vials trembled in the air above them. A child who needed to know why his parents died. Why he was different. Why strange things happened around him. A child who needed to be told the truth. His voice echoed across the lake. In the silence that followed, everyone stared at him, goblins and wizards alike. Harry took a deep breath, steadying himself. You took everything from me, he said, quieter now. My parents. My heritage. My memories. You left me with people who hated me, and then you made sure I wouldn't even understand why. Dumbledore's face was lined with genuine pain. Harry, don't, Harry cut him off. Just, don't. The hook-nosed professor, Snape, spoke for the first time, his voice cold and precise. The boy is clearly beyond reasoning with. The goblins have poisoned his mind against us. Harry's eyes snapped to him. The goblins gave me my mind back. Griselda stepped forward, her healer's robes rustling. With a gesture of her hand, one of the crystal vials floated down to hover just above the table. This, she said, is the first memory charm. Placed on Harry Potter on November 2, 1981, the day after he was left with the Dursleys. The magical signature is yours, Albus Dumbledore. Dumbledore didn't deny it. Yes. And this, Griselda continued, summoning another vial, was placed on July 15, 1983, after Harry accidentally turned his cousin's hair blue during a tantrum. The signature belongs to Bartemius Crouch. The severe-looking ministry official with the toothbrush mustache straightened. As head of magical law enforcement at that time, it was my duty to maintain the statute of secrecy. Vial after vial descended, each with its date, its incident, its caster. Some came from Dumbledore. Some from ministry officials. A few, alarmingly, had magical signatures that matched known Death Eaters who had claimed to be under the Imperious Curse after Voldemort's fall. As each memory was catalogued, Harry's face grew harder, the muscles in his jaw working. When Griselda finished, she stepped back. 143 violations. 143 assaults on a child's mind. This is not protection. This is not security. This is torture. The tiny professor, Flitwick, had tears in his eyes. Albus, he said, voice breaking. How could you allow this? Dumbledore looked very old suddenly. I made a terrible mistake, he said quietly. I believed I was acting for the greater good. I believed the prophecy. Harry interrupted. What prophecy? Dumbledore hesitated, glancing at the ministry officials. No more secrets, Ragnok said, voice like an avalanche. No more lies. The boy has earned the truth. After a long moment, Dumbledore nodded. Before you were born, a prophecy was made. It stated that a child born at the end of July would have the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. That Voldemort would mark him as his equal, but he would have power the Dark Lord knows not. Harry's scar burned. And that's, me? Yes, Dumbledore said simply. You are the child of prophecy. The one with the power to defeat Voldemort when he returns. Harry felt dizzy suddenly. So all of this, everything you did to me, was to turn me into some kind of weapon against Voldemort? Dumbledore shook his head. No, Harry. It was to keep you safe until you were ready. To give you a childhood free from the burden of destiny. Harry's laugh was hollow. A childhood? Is that what you call what I had with the Dursleys? I never intended, I don't care what you intended, Harry said, cutting him off. I care what you did. What all of you did. His eyes swept the table, taking in each wizard face. You played with my mind like it was a toy. You decided what I could and couldn't remember. What I could and couldn't feel. Who gave you that right? No one answered. Into the silence, Ragnok spoke. Under the Treaty of Stone and Blood, the Goblin Nation claims guardianship of Harry James Potter. We demand reparations for the harm done to him. We demand punishment for those responsible. And we demand acknowledgement of our right to raise him as one of our own. The Minister of Magic spluttered. This is outrageous. The boy who lived belongs in the wizarding world. He must attend Hogwarts, learn proper magic. I've been learning magic for 7 years, Harry said coolly. Goblin magic. Ancient magic. Magic your kind has forgotten or forbidden. To demonstrate, he raised his hand. Without a wand, without a word, he called fire to his palm, a small, perfect flame that danced between his fingers, neither burning him nor consuming oxygen. The wizard stared in shock. Dumbledore's eyes widened. Wandless elemental manipulation, he murmured. At 11. Extraordinary. Harry closed his hand, extinguishing the flame. The goblins didn't lock me in a cupboard. They didn't make me forget who I was. They taught me. They protected me. They gave me back my memories. McGonagall stepped forward, her face softened with emotion Harry hadn't expected to see. Mr. Potter, she said gently. Harry. No one here disputes that terrible wrongs were done to you. But Hogwarts was your parents' home. They would have wanted you to come here, to learn the magic they loved. Harry felt a pang at that. It was true, in the memories he'd recovered, he'd seen his parents laughing in Hogwarts robes, practicing spells in classrooms, running across these very grounds. If I hadn't been raised by the goblins, he said slowly, I would never have known that. Because you people took those memories away. McGonagall flinched as though he'd struck her. Dumbledore looked at Ragnok. What do you want, King Ragnok? Truly. Ragnok's eyes gleamed. Justice. And what form would this justice take? Those who placed memory charms on Harry Potter will be punished according to Goblin law. The Ministry officials shifted nervously. Goblin law has no jurisdiction over wizards, Crouch said stiffly. Ragnok's smile was terrible. Does an army of 5,000 goblins at your doorstep not convince you otherwise? Dumbledore raised a hand. Let us be reasonable. War benefits no one. He looked at Harry. What do you want, Harry? Not Ragnok. Not the Goblin Nation. You. Harry hesitated. He looked at Ragnok, who had been like a grandfather to him. At Griphook, who had been his friend and brother when he had no one. At the Goblin army that had marched across Britain to demand justice for him. Then he looked at Hogwarts in the distance, the castle that should have been his first real home, the place his parents had loved, the world they had died to protect him for. I want. He swallowed hard. I want to belong somewhere. I want to know who I am. Dumbledore's eyes softened. You are Harry Potter. Son of James and Lily. A wizard born with extraordinary gifts and a heavy destiny. Hogwarts will always be open to you. And he is Harry, ward of Ragnok, brother of Griphook, student of goblin magic, Ragnok countered. Our home will always be open to you as well. Harry looked between them, feeling the weight of choice press down on him. Then, slowly, a realization dawned. A third path. A way forward that belonged to him alone. Why does it have to be one or the other, he asked. Everyone stared at him. What do you mean, my boy? Dumbledore asked. I mean, Harry said, straightening to his full height, I'm tired of other people deciding who I am and where I belong. From now on, I decide. He turned to Ragnok. Grandfather, he said, the term of affection deliberate and public. The goblins saved me. You gave me back my mind, my memories, my strength. You taught me that I could be powerful without being cruel. I will always be grateful, and the Goblin Nation will always be my first home. Ragnok's fierce expression softened just slightly. Harry turned back to Dumbledore. But my parents were wizards. They loved this place. They fought and died to protect our world from Voldemort. I won't turn my back on their legacy. Dumbledore's eyes gleamed with something like hope. Harry's voice hardened. But I won't forgive what was done to me. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Those responsible will face consequences. He looked at each of the ministry officials in turn, then back at Dumbledore. So here's what's going to happen, he said, and was surprised at how steady his voice was, how natural it felt to stand before kings and ministers and make demands. I will attend Hogwarts. I will learn wizard magic alongside what the goblins have taught me. I will prepare to face Voldemort when he returns. He paused, making sure he had everyone's attention. But the Treaty of Stone and Blood stays in effect. The Goblin Nation remains my legal guardian. Griphook stays with me at Hogwarts as my protector. And those who placed memory charms on me face justice, not death, but reparations. The Minister of Magic turned purple. This is blackmail. You can't dictate terms to the Ministry of Magic. Harry's smile was cold. I'm not. The Goblin Army is. Ragnok made a sound suspiciously like a chuckle. Furthermore, Harry continued, the truth about what was done to me becomes public. All of it. The memory charms. The prophecy. Voldemort's connection to me. The wizarding world deserves to know who was making decisions about the boy who lived. The ministry officials exploded in protests. Dumbledore raised his hand for silence, his expression grave. Harry, he said carefully, some secrets are kept for good reason. The prophecy, if Voldemort's supporters knew its full contents. Then they'd know what I already know, Harry said flatly. That someday, I'll have to face him. That one of us will die at the other's hand. I'm done being protected by lies, Headmaster. I'd rather face the truth, however dangerous it is. There was a long, tense silence. Then, surprisingly, McGonagall spoke. The boy is right, Albus. Enough secrets. Enough manipulation. We owe him, and the wizarding world, the truth. Flitwick nodded vigorously. I agree. What was done to Harry was unconscionable. If we are to begin making amends, honesty must be the foundation. Even Snape, his face still cold and closed, gave a short nod. The Dark Lord already knows the boy is his downfall. Secrecy serves no purpose now. Dumbledore looked at each of them in turn, then back at Harry. For a moment, something like pride flickered in his ancient blue eyes. Very well, he said finally. I accept your terms, Harry. On behalf of Hogwarts, at least. He glanced at the ministry officials. The minister may have different opinions. Cornelius Fudge sputtered. This is outrageous. The ministry does not negotiate with children you've wronged. Harry cut in. With armies at your gates. With the truth itself. Which part bothers you more, Minister? Fudge's face went from purple to white. Amelia Bones stepped forward. As head of magical law enforcement, I acknowledge the wrongs done to Mr. Potter. The department will make full reparations, and those responsible will face internal discipline. She fixed Fudge with a steely glare. Won't they, Minister? Fudge wilted under her gaze. Why yes. Of course. Reparations. Full investigation. Justice will be served. Harry nodded once, satisfied. Then he turned to Ragnok. Grandfather, he said quietly. Is this acceptable to you? To the Goblin Nation? Ragnok studied him for a long moment. In his ancient eyes, Harry saw pride and sorrow and a fierce, protective love that had nothing to do with treaties or politics. You have grown wise, Harry Potter, Ragnok said at last. Wiser than many who have lived 10 times your years. He inclined his head. The Goblin Nation accepts your terms. Justice without vengeance. Truth without malice. A bridge between worlds. Relief washed through Harry so strongly his knees nearly buckled. Griphook gripped his shoulder, steadying him. It is decided, Dumbledore announced. Harry Potter will attend Hogwarts under the continued guardianship of the Goblin Nation. A formal apology and reparations will be made for the memory charms placed upon him. And the truth, his eyes met Harry's, old secrets and old regrets passing between them, the truth will be told. As the words settled over the pavilion, Harry felt something shift inside him. Not healing, the wounds were too deep for that, the betrayal too profound. But perhaps the beginning of something new. Something that belonged to him alone. He looked up at Hogwarts Castle, gleaming in the morning light. Then back at the Goblin Army, their armor catching the sun like 1,000 mirrors. Two worlds. Two homes. Two parts of himself that didn't need to be at war anymore. "I have one more request," Harry said. Dumbledore raised an eyebrow. "Yes." Harry's smile was small but genuine. "I want a proper wand. And I want to see the look on Voldemort's face when I use goblin magic against him." Griphook burst out laughing. Ragnok's face split in a fierce grin. Even Dumbledore's eyes twinkled, just slightly. "I believe that can be arranged." As they walked back toward the castle, Harry between Ragnok and Dumbledore, goblin and wizard walking side by side for perhaps the first time in centuries, Harry felt the weight of the past 7 years, of memory and forgetting, of loss and discovery, settle into something like purpose. He was Harry Potter. The boy who lived. Ward of the Goblin King. Student of ancient magic. Child of prophecy. And finally, at last, the author of his own story. Behind them, the 143 crystal vials rose into the air, catching the sunlight. Each one a piece of stolen memory. Each one a testament to what had been done to him. Each one a reminder that the truth, however painful, was always worth fighting for. Hogwarts waited ahead, its doors open. The goblin army stood at his back, their weapons gleaming. And for the first time in his life, Harry Potter walked forward without fear. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.